On this episode of Content Minded, it is spooky season. Halloween is upon us, and that is why I felt it was necessary to do a mega film review episode. My good friend Parker Longbaugh, the pulp writer, joins me to talk about the format, genre, and the very meaning of found footage films, found footage horror films, and its role in our world. Why are they so seductive? Why are they so prevalent? There are various answers as to how economical they are. But why do they really have a pull on us in terms of their ability to blend reality with much older forms of mythology and terrifying realities? And so we will discuss all of that. We'll also discuss his pulp writing and an essay that he did called The Hotel Detective. The role of like the noir hotel detective that used to exist, but like many things, crushed by global late capitalism. The hotel detective is no longer a prevalent reality. It is another role in society that has gone by the wayside, that only existed on the margins of things. So we'll talk about various found footage films from the Horror in the High Desert series, one of my personal favorites, Savage Land, and also the origins of the genre of found footage, and among other ones, including the Wreck series, its later American adaptation in Quarantine 1 and 2. So sit down, enjoy. There's a lot of very exciting stuff that we talk about. And also like, share, and subscribe, click the bell, all that good stuff. And please, for the love of God, support me on patreon.com/Giner Productions and substack.com/Gio's Content Corner. Both of them are only $5 a month. As always, I'm your host, Gio Penichetti, artist, podcaster, conversationalist, writer, so on and so forth. Many hats that I have to juggle. Enjoy, God bless, and I hope you all have a spectacular Halloween. Now let's get to the program. We are back. Another exciting episode of Content Minded. This time I have Parker. Is that Longbaugh or
Longbaugh.
Longbaugh? Like, oh, not like Rush Limbaugh, like Longbaugh.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. So we are here to talk about found footage. Before we get to that, like, who are you? What's your CV? How long have you been an alcoholic? What's your favorite color? Um, I make that stupid joke every time. I don't know why, but you are a writer. You are a pulp writer, if I
Yep.
recall. And
That's correct.
so, what's your history, and what are you trying to do? And maybe describe a bit of your work as well. And it'll
Sure.
all be linked down below, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess you could say I'm part of like this wave of pulp writers that have really like sprang up, I would say, over the past 2 or 3 years. There's several of us out there writing. I mean, pulp itself is originally just meant, cheap. It was just cheap paper that you would write,
Yeah.
cheap, luring tales of all sorts of stuff on. But it really encompasses, many things, everything from crime fiction, weird fiction, detective fiction, sword and sorcery. So it encompasses a lot of different sort of subgenres. I'm mainly writing in what I call the weird, hard boiled pulp arena. So it's a combination of like detective fiction, but also a lot of weird horror elements to it as well.
Oh, so like they made a series of it. It was only one season, unfortunately. What was it called? Berlin. It's been many years since I watched it. Um, the Berlin Files or something like that, where it was like a detective, but he had sort of like spiritual psychic abilities. Um, but then, of course, like Lovecraft, he crossed a lot of those lines. Like, for example, even stories like The Alchemist, there's
Right.
clearly more of like a fantasy or traditional. I mean, fantasy is such like an abused term nowadays, but like there's more of like a traditional fantasy element to there, but it still has that like Lovecraftian nature. Not so much as the other ones, of course, but like, yeah.
Yeah, the occult detective also comes out of that tradition as well. That's another pretty common character
Yeah.
trope that you see.
But then what really I asked this to my friend Dave Martell, who runs the Biz Archives.
Yep.
Yeah. I asked him like what is the relevance of pulp, because pulp seems to come about, you would say, what, the 19th century to the later 20th century, or
Yeah,
yeah.
I would argue that, well, it sort of it morphed into pulps morphed into like men's adventure
Yeah, like
fiction
guys
in
going
like
an
the night.
adventure type of deal. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like right around like Alistair MacLean, like right around the 1960s. You start seeing like those guys pop up, and so it really changed into that, and then that goes into essentially the 1980s, maybe a little bit into the early 90s, but essentially two things really killed it off, in my view. I mean, this is just my personal opinion.
Hmm.
Graphic novels coming about in the late 80s, early 90s started becoming super popular.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
now, much more adult material, right? Versus like
Watchmen,
traditional
for
comic book.
example.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then video games, of course, like the video games basically just completely, buried it for the longest time. Once people could start going into video games and start being the character rather
Yeah.
than just reading about the character, that made all the difference for a lot of people.
But would you say it came about as a sort of release valve for a lot of men in like in modernity, where it became this sort of very mass produced, easy, I mean, this is the stereotype, of course, like easygoing, mass produced, men orientated literature that was then, like you were saying, swallowed up by other mediums. But I guess like now pulp has, would you say it's achieved a newer relevance? Like, do people still, I mean, it's pertinent to what we're talking about with found footage. It seems that the horror film as well was another thing that eclipsed pulp, but there's always like this weird kissing cousin relationship between the two.
Yeah.
So, why is it sparked like new interest? Is it just because like a niche hipster audience wants to read again, and they want stories that are not like captured by, I mean, pulp in general was not necessarily captured by the mainstream publishing industry. It often relied on magazines and things of that nature that were sort of like out of the norm. But is that spirit still with us? Like having, like you being a part of this new wave, or is it just that like the mainstream publishing industry is like so um what's a word I could use besides toxic? Because toxic's such a, but for lack of a better term, like a toxic sort of thing when it comes to like very like clear adventure stories that appeal to men. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, and I was on Good Old Boys not too long ago, and they were kind of asking me a similar question, and I think what the reason why pulp appeals to men is because at the end of the day, it's about a competent man who shows up and solves a problem.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an occult investigation. Maybe that's a Western where he's having to deal with criminals or bandits, or maybe it's, Conan having to fight a monster, or, a bunch of picks, or, whoever. And so just having when was the last time you saw like a major like Hollywood production where you just had a dude who's just very competent and solves whatever the issue is and doesn't need a woman to help him or a woman to take over, is just able to do it on his own, and he's not he's a serious man. He's not a laughing stock
And
or
that's not like Cape Slop. That'd be
and yeah, and that's not comic, but even comic books, it's not even, like the days of like the original Iron Man are over. Now Iron Man's been replaced, I think, by like a powerful black woman or something.
Yeah, even, well, I think even like oh, it's slipping my mind now. Fleming. I can't believe I'm having this brain fart. 007.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um, what's his? Oh, God, I can't
James
believe
Bond.
James Bond. James Bond. Like even James Bond is like I think a powerful black woman now. But
Yeah.
but I guess like to play devil's advocate, like a criticism has been that pulp appealed to like very like childish sensibilities, and a lot of the women were sort of like very one-dimensionally written. I mean, sci-fi in general gets lambasted as this like I'm Isaac Asimov infamously could not write female characters. Um, so I think like, but then you were saying like popular media, especially the fiction publishing industry, what is being published. That I mean, there's a lot of great women writers, but even like the stuff that is published that are more like female centric. I mean, a lot of it, unfortunately, is sort of like book talk smut, and like,
Yeah.
whereas like I think pulp appeals to. I mean, a lot of pulp does have a sort of eroticism, but it's more of like eroticism is viewed from a competent man as opposed to like, you know, the man is like a stand-in for whatever deranged fantasy a lot of these writers on TikTok have.
And the
So
women the women in pulp stories are drawn to that. This is why like Conan always had women, flocking to him because they knew, well, this is a guy who can protect me. Like if the Picts, jump out of their holes and start attacking us, like this is the guy who's going to be able to take them apart, and I don't have to
right.
worry about being, ravaged and my throat cut.
Yeah, and I think it's similar criticism, but it depends on your view of it. Uh, I mean, obviously, to a lot of people, not a criticism, but like some of the criticism has been laid to like horror films because horror films have not like traditional big name actresses and actors, but the actresses that they do have are obviously more physically attractive, even if they're not like they don't have a name. It seems to be like a common theme in pulp and horror that like the women are tend to be like more attractive and like slightly more unrealistic than like a lot of the norm. Like even the films that we're talking about today, like Wreck, like the female lead that does have a female lead,
Right.
but there's other forces at play, and she herself is like mousy brunette attractive. But yeah, um, so I guess like it does occupy a particular avenue of literature. Um, but yeah, but how did you start writing pulp though? Like, what was your main thing? What made you tick as a writer? Yeah.
Well, I've always loved pulp. I always loved the big names in pulp like Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft,
Mm.
Clark Ashton Smith, who unfortunately just doesn't get the love like Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft do. But I think he was just as good of a writer as they were, and lived longer and produced just as much as they did. But I always loved pulp writing. I had an uncle that was really into Conan back
Oh
in
yeah.
like the 80s. Used to get
Yeah.
Marvel's, the Savage Sword of Conan um, magazine, and yeah, he just always he would just fed me. He just fed me a steady diet of Edgar Rice Burroughs and Robert E. Howard and um, a bunch of different pulp writers. For me, I'd always like played around with writing stories, um, but I never really took it seriously. And then man, this was probably like maybe 15 years ago. I ended up becoming part of a Call of Cthulhu role playing group, um, and the original game master. He his job was sending him out west, and this was before the days of like Zoom, so you can't really do much,
Mm.
online. Like you had to actually play, face to face. And so they asked me to take over and become the game master for this particular group. And I can be sometimes a little bit of a perfectionist, so I dived in like feet first, and just created like all of these scenarios using. I was living in the Washington D.C. area at the time. This is why my book takes place in and around the greater capital region in the D.C. area. And so I just started creating all of these different missions, these different storylines that took place in the DC area, using sometimes monuments, and there's just a lot of weird lore within the DC area if you really dive into it. Of course, there's like a lot of the occult stuff, but there's just a lot of weirdness there. So I just started incorporating that. And several of them were like, these are great, man. Like, you should put these into like stories, because, this would make an amazing book. And it really wasn't until COVID basically that I sat down and started pulling like all of this old material together and just started writing these different short stories. And they eventually became my book.
Oh wow! And for those who don't know, like, how do you play this game? Is it like live action role play, or like
Yeah,
what's the role of like a lore master?
it's just Dungeons and Dragons with Call of Cthulhu mythos
Okay.
added in it. So you're a dungeon master, a DM essentially, and then you have players, and the players are investigators usually. Sometimes they're academic, sometimes they're private investigators. It just kind of depends upon which direction that that people want to go in.
Oh wow. This seems quite this, this seems quite like a load of tism, but apparently it's like that type of stuff is like still really popular. Um and like you were saying, pulp is becoming even more popular nowadays. Um but but this connection with horror though is quite interesting as well, because one thing I was always fascinated by was sort of like the blending of the sort of the unreality and the reality together, or like the disruption of the real, and there's like a logical sequence there. um but actually we can, let's pause. What was I saying? Oh yeah, about horror film, like blending reality and unreality. um but we'll get to that, but what was I saying before? Oh yeah, so then you started writing these stories, and was there always sort of like a noir angle in your mind? Was that like always something you gravitated towards?
Not so much of a noir angle, more of a hard-boiled angle. Hard-boiled is just where you have usually a character, a protagonist who, is just kind of more of an action-oriented type of guy, who's going to fight whatever the antagonist happens to be in the story. Usually with hard-boiled protagonists, they're men who can solve the problem, but they're not perfect men.
Hmm.
These are going to be guys who are, maybe they drink too much, maybe they're womanizers, maybe they have anger management issues. But at the end of the day, they're going to get the job done.
So it's like shonen animes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. But but and you could see like why it's it's appealing to like young men in particular. Um, but s- so we'll move on, because I was saying about like this connection between like pulp and horror, how they both have the underlying principle of the distortion of reality, or rather reality being bended in such a way. Like, I mean, there's a lot of literary terms like fantastical realism or whatever, but it seems that there's this complication of reality
Mm.
that's being disrupted by something that is on the outside.
That, and
Yeah.
also the characters in a horror movie, like ultimately they become what I like to call the reluctant occult investigator,
Yeah.
right? They're not trained occult investigators, but something weird is happening, and it's like, oh, we have to investigate this. We have to figure out what's going on, if just to like try to survive the situation.
Yeah.
But that is a really important element in just about any horror. You have to have curious people who want to figure out what is going on.
So, what got you interested? Because we were talking about this, we were DMing about this. I've always been fascinated by found footage, even though it's, you know, lambasted as like being on the cheaper side of horror films.
Mhm.
But like, what got you really interested in it? Because like, I remember when I was a kid, like, I guess like if you're a millennial, you have this experience. Like when I was like younger, um, like all my cousins are Gen Xers,
Mhm.
and they're like, have you seen the Blair Witch Project?
Yeah.
And that was like, I remember watching it after I came home from school. It was like on TV. I remember watching the Blair Witch Project, not thinking anything of it. But then there was a period where I kept needing more, and there's like a lot of like, you know, stuff available like on Tubi or whatever. Some of them, I mean, they vary in quality, of course.
Right.
There's some like really like cheap ass janky shows, but some of them are quite good. But like, what got you interested in it? The found footage thing.
Well, I think you can relate this to pulp as well, because a lot
Mm.
of pulp is terrible. Like there's a lot of terrible pulp stories out there, because
Yeah.
it's a low bar. It's a low bar to entry. And the same thing with found footage is you don't need that much money to do a found footage horror movie versus like maybe a more traditional horror movie. So a lot of people can go into that field, right, and create something. And I don't know, I have this quirk in my personality that I like to dive into things that have a low bar to entry and wade through all the crap in order to find that one diamond. So I can pick
Yeah.
out that one diamond and say, "Oh, this is amazing. I had
That
to wade
Jemmy.
through like all this crap to find it, but I found it."
Yeah, so you have to separate the gems from the coal.
Yeah.
So no, that's like me. But I think because ever since I was a kid, I was always fascinated by films that like a group of people have to band together to fight something, right? Like my
Mhm.
two favorite films growing up, well, apart from 28 Days Later, was Ghosts of Mars and Vampires, both by John Carpenter,
Oh, I
mid
love Ghost of
90s.
Mars.
Yeah, like that. No, this isn't found footage, but like Ghosts of Mars, I watched it late at night on like Turner Broadcasting or whatever it was, and it just like tickled my brain in such a fundamental way because the whole thing is about the fight for survival and how survival becomes this ultimate principle on a harsh landscape. And I mean, it does have like the buddy cop element between Desolation Williams and Natasha Henstridge's character, but the soundtrack that was provided by Anthrax and like the feel, the vibe of it, and the violence of it, like it's. But yeah, something about it was really like bad. I know like a lot of people they really don't like the sort of later John Carpenter. Um, like Vampires was also great.
Yeah.
Uh, the way that they let James Woods just say whatever he wanted to, which was very funny. Um, but yeah, but so I didn't know that you were also a fan of Ghosts of Mars.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
I really, as things have kind of continued in our society, I really appreciate the whole subplot that Carpenter stuck in there with Mars being a matriarchy and it's just
yeah,
totally incompetent. Like they just can't do anything correctly. And like the only people who are able to, in the end, like defeat like this ghost zombie army is like a couple of toxic males.
yeah. Like Jericho Butler, which I think was one of the first roles with Jason Statham. Although I think like he did Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels before that. Uh, there was like a few. I will admit there is a few glaring plot holes in Ghosts of Mars. One
Oh
of them
yeah,
being like, why would they set off the nuclear power plant when they know that they can't destroy the ghost themselves? They can just destroy the host,
right.
and it would have taken them months to travel to the main city of Mars on foot. But anyways, that's not the point. Like I guess that wasn't. Apparently, that was going to be another Snake Plissken film, but they're like, well, I guess like they couldn't get Kurt Russell again, sorry, Russell Kirk, and they're like, okay, what are we gonna do? Oh, I guess we have Ice Cube, and so they made like a separate film. But like I don't know, it's just like one thing, like when you're a kid and like, yeah, because when I was younger, like of course I always loved like Chud Media, Chud music, Chud media. And of course, like the early 2000s was the heyday of like the Chud, the middle class Chud. So, but anyways, about found footage, I guess to go over the history of it, I mean, the first found footage, speaking of Chud music, there was a great music video by the band Necrophagia. Not Necrophagus, Necrophagia, which was a side project of Phil Anselmo from Pantera. And they have this song, I can't say it for YouTube, Cannibal Hullabunga. They're Cannibal H Cost. There you go. There you go. We'll say that. And he was explaining before the music video. He's like, people look at the Blair Witch Project, and actually was this found film, Cannibal H Cost, in the 70s, that was like way better, and it was the first found footage film. I mean, there have been like cinema verite films before that, but the Cannibal film, that was like the first one. The concept of a film crew attaining raw footage of a horrific event. Of course, in this case, a horrific event that they provoke, but nevertheless. So, have you? I'm assuming you've seen both. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen. I've seen that film that you're referencing to, as well as like all the derivatives. Because as soon as like one Italian film becomes popular, immediately like they have to put out like a dozen similar films. I love how the Italians do that. Yeah, this is popular. We need to like replicate it 1,000 times.
Yeah, a lot of giallo films are like that.
Oh yeah.
Some of them are great though. Those giallo films, like I was watching this one called The Burial Ground, which is like very, very Italian type of zombie film.
Yeah.
Right. Like beautiful women getting massacred. Underlying themes of SAST, if you know what I mean. Like it was very it was incredible. But yeah, so that was the first found footage film, and it becomes a very popular genre. Then Blair Witch Project becomes I guess you could say, the example of found footage. The way that they sold it, the way that they virtually disappeared to promote the film, that lays out the template for the Gen X and then later the millennial generation. But then like the perfect found footage film that came among us millennials would be, of course, like the Paranormal Activity series, and everything in between. Like a lot of zombie films, for example, have a found footage element. Like there's this lesser known Romero film that's a very good example of it. I think it's called Diary of the Dead.
Yep.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
So maybe if you go over the history of it and like what you like and what you don't like, that would be
I don't really know like the history other than kind of what you just talked about, with Cannibal being like sort of probably the first. But it really is I think Blair Witch Project is the first that they were able to show people you can make a film like this and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
You can do it really on the cheap and get an incredible return on investment for something like that. And so, yeah, everybody just sort of jumped on board for many years afterwards. But then there was, I think it seemed like the paranormal ones, once they got into like, 4 and 5, that's where you really started seeing that genre sort of just kind of, at least among studios or people with like people who could back those types of films with a lot of money. That's where you really started to see it, in my view, like die. And the only people who kept on doing it were, again, small independent filmmakers who just didn't have a lot of money. So that's all they could do. And that's how you get something like Tubi, where they could just dump their movie onto Tubi in order to make some cash. And so Tubi has this entire category that you can just explore.
Yeah, and a lot of them are crap, like we were saying.
Oh,
but a lot of them are gems. Some of them I thought were going to be like awful. I found out like being oddly compelled by them. Like, do you know Creepshow?
Yeah.
Though I think it's like one guy who's this serial killer, and he's got this like weird, disturbing relationship with his mother and this wolf mask. and he just like basically he does this like very campy thing where he like he like parades around and acts sort of like very weird and bubbly. But then at the very end, he dispatches the people that he's paying to film him do these different things. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. But then I got into it, and apparently there was 2 films before that. What are they called? The creep tapes or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like it's oddly compelling. It's super low budget. Like you're basically just paying for like the camera equipment and the actors.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's like,
the Duplass brothers, I think, are the
yeah, the
ones that.
Duplass brothers. Yeah, yeah, the Duplass brothers. Yeah. And it's like it's strangely compelling. Like you kind of know it's kind of sloppish, but there's something like really there's something to it. Yeah. Um, but like you were saying, maybe it is because they are cheap to make, and for something that is like sort of like Kino Dogme, like very low budget, not a lot of special effects. Although some of them do become quite elaborate, like the Taking of Deborah Logan, for example.
Right.
But they there is like such an incredible open template there. A lot of it is supernatural. A lot of it's a zombie genre. I mean, the 2010s, like The Walking Dead, did a similar thing where it basically destroyed the zombie genre forever,
Yeah.
right? But there is like so many different things you could do without the constraints of traditional filmmaking, even just by suggesting certain features, the way that Blair Witch did with all of those ornaments, those symbols they found out in the woods, and the element of like lost time is another one that's a very popular one. But why do you think like these things are so compelling, even though we know they're cheap, we know they're mass produced, we know that they're like amateurish, but like why is it that they are still like I know like you were saying like Tubi's littered with them.
Hmm.
Why are they still like oddly compelling for some reason? Like, what do you think, anyways, as a writer?
Well, that's just it. I think as a writer, I can appreciate if you don't have much money, you better be really good with your writing. Like you
Yeah,
better be able to write a compelling story. If you can't afford like good special effects, if you can't afford to be able to do a lot of shooting or do some impressive things when it comes to, the camera, then your writing is just going to have to be on point, especially if you have maybe amateur actors
yeah,
who they're amateur actors. They don't have a lot of experience, and you're not going to be able to get a whole lot of range out of them. So you have to rely on good writing. And it always amazes me when I'm able to see something that's so low budget, but I can appreciate some amazing writing that the usually the script writer and the writer and the director are the same person.
yeah,
So it's somebody who has the good ones anyways, or somebody clearly are people who have talent. Like you talk like with Wreck, like the original Wreck, that twist at the end, I never even saw coming. I just thought,
yeah.
oh,
Me
this
either.
is going to be a zombie movie. This is going to be a regular, some chemical from some lab somewhere is leaked into a river, and now people are turning into zombies and killing everybody. But if you watch that movie all the way through, you learn that, oh no, this is something completely different. And
Yeah,
that's just some good writing. That twist was some really good writing.
yeah. Spoiler alerts. Although it is on Tubi, so you could probably like I would
Yeah.
highly recommend watching it.
You haven't watched
Um,
it by now. It's like 15 years old at this point.
yeah, yeah. It's funny because I remember years ago I watched the 2 quarantine films, and I really liked them. Right, like especially the last scene with what's her face, um, I forget her name, but she was in a number of like very popular shows, and wasn't she like in White Chicks too? I think she was in White Chicks, but
I
anyways,
actually never even saw Quarantine.
yeah, I watched Quarantine, and it was good for a zombie film, especially the environment of it being contained in such a small space.
Right.
It doesn't have the same feel that a lot of the other like Romero zombies or the 28 series does, where the world is ending. there's a lot of these like geopolitical and public health implications that go awry. Whereas like Quarantine has that. It has definitely like this sort of, you are subject to bare life, which is again another very popular trope of the zombie film. You
Right.
become bare life, to quote Agamben. But in Quarantine, when I watched Rec, I saw that Quarantine was vastly inferior to the original material, because Rec has like the sort of like metaphysical, and for spoiler alert, in Rec it is discovered that a priest scientist synthesized a demonic virus, and they're not real zombies, they are demon possessed, but they basically act like zombies.
Right.
And then it's discovered that the main character, the woman who is the reporter, she encounters the original child that was being performed an exorcism on. But you can only see this girl if you have a UV light. This girl infects her with a worm that is like the soul of the devil. And it's 4 films. I think like 3 was terrible.
Yeah.
Like 3 was kind of needless.
Right.
But number 4 was like the crescendo of it, where they're on this ship. So again, another small environment. But it follows like a very... I noticed like it had more of the sensibilities of being made in Spain than when the American filmmakers took the concept and created a film in America of it, where it becomes, again, it's very secular. It's based on a research lab in this penthouse suite. And it's a traditional zombie movie.
Right.
But Rec, it was so much more special because of that element, that sort of like exorcism and Catholicism and demon possession. But yeah, go ahead, Parker. Like, what did you think about it? Yeah.
No, I loved it. Yeah, I loved Rec, and that was one of the reasons why I never saw Quarantine, because I was like, oh, they're not going to have this religious supernatural element, not for the Hollywood version. They're going to completely make it some sort of scientific issue. So yeah, I never bothered. And I remember reading several interviews that basically said, yeah, like if you saw Rec and you loved Rec, don't go see Quarantine. You'd be sorely disappointed.
Yeah, and of course, like Quarantine had that like Hollywood spackle to it, and it was well done though. I gotta admit, like the certain scenes, it didn't match them very well.
Okay.
But Rec just provided so much more, right? I mean, barring the third film. The third film, I think, was kind of stupid and needless.
Yeah.
But although I don't know, the wedding scene was kind of like it was cheesy and corny. But I don't know. I mean, we're talking about found footage, so I guess like cheesy and corny is like a given. But
they were the director was too much trying to make it into an Evil Dead ripoff. That's what I kind of found offensive. I was like, I'm not interested in this.
That's actually a good comparison. Yeah, it is kind of like an Evil Dead ripoff. Yeah, but yeah, Rec was very fascinating because I think it combines a lot of the different elements that you find in found footage films of the supernatural, the zombie genre. Like you were saying, like someone who is competent. I mean, this time a female protagonist who is competent in trying to solve this mystery or this horror. And I noticed that there is a progression of found footage where there's a skill. There are ones, I guess, like profane and sacred would be a good distinction, or secular and metaphysical, where you have like very metaphysical ones, which is of the realm of traditional horror, like the Poughkeepsie, no, sorry, that was the other example. The Poughkeepsie tapes are the other side. The Poughkeepsie, I'm getting tongue-tied. The Poughkeepsie tapes are the thoroughly secular, serial killer orientated, but nevertheless terrifying while you're watching it version of found footage. But on the other side, the metaphysical side, you have The Taking of Deborah Logan. You have a lot of these exorcist films. You have, I guess the zombie thing is like in between, depending on your interpretation. But did you watch the Poughkeepsie? See, every time I say that, I'm thinking of Orc Brand threatening people by saying, "What are you gonna do? You come to my apartment?" And he like lists his apartment, Poughkeepsie, New York. They need to remake the Poughkeepsie tapes, but Orc Brand is the main serial killer. That would actually that would actually work. But no, but you watched the Poughkeepsie tapes, right? That's like one of the legendary found footage films.
Yeah, yeah. But I gotta be honest with you though, like serial killer horror is just not. I'm just not into it as much. You know,
Mm.
like you mentioned Giallo earlier. I think the Italians do that far better
Oh
than
yeah.
the Americans do when it comes to any kind of serial killer slasher movie. I would much rather watch some sort of 70s 80s giallo over um an American serial killer flick.
But do you think it's because it seems antiquated, or yeah? They're not around anymore. Now we have like mass casualty people. I guess they were decommissioned by the CIA in the 90s. So
Yeah, yeah, different MK Ultra program, I guess.
programmed to kill. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's just like I said, I just never really have been all that interested in that type of antagonist, I guess is what I should say.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I remember this interview with the great. I mean, a lot of his stuff is like in you know horror movies and tattoo shows, but the great painter Joe Coleman, who does these very elaborate illustrated paintings of these like counterculture figures like Timothy Leary or Albert Fish and a number of other serial killers, and they were doing a documentary on his work, and he said, "Well, the thing is, in America, a pop culture figure like the cowboy becomes very antiquated because the frontier is closed, and it becomes, for a variety of reasons, an antiquated genre of fiction in filmmaking, right? And a lot of people say, well, because of the racism and stuff like that, colonialism, blah, 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 which is, I mean, a valid criticism. But the serial killer becomes this plague upon the American psyche that has this like very dark romanticism attached to it. But by the time you get to nowadays, there isn't. I mean, the Poughkeepsie tapes was one of them, but there isn't that same fascination. And the other option, which is, I mean, there has been films made about mass casualty events. I mean, there was the famous one mimicking Columbine. There's that UK one. Of course, the UK one they had to use the kid had to use a bow and arrow. But it seems that the thing that replaced the serial, in the popular imagination, cannot be touched for a variety of political reasons, and therefore the fascination with them, apart from true crime, which I mean, apparently people have told me that's also dying down as well. The whole like true crime obsession. But but horror films always have this very unique place, especially in the American psyche, right?
Mm,
Like even nowadays, you have the Terrifier series is very popular, which is
right.
really like the most postmodern, like the most direct reification of what a horror film is. It's a clown that can't die that kills people. That's it, like and so it's like John Wick in a way, right? Like it's like in terms of gun fu, but yeah, that does seem like the serial movie is not as impactful as the other ones. And I wonder if it's because in horror you can express a borderline metaphysical sentiment. Like what is your thoughts on that? Same with like Pulp Fiction, I guess, as well.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, this is an interesting topic. Um, I also wonder though, if you see a lot of found footage, they tend to they tend to deal with urban legends most
Yeah.
often. At least the really like independent um, found footage movies that you tend to see on
Mm.
Tubi. It's usually has to do with some sort of, maybe it's a known urban legend, like I don't know, Sasquatch or something, or it's some sort of local legend that, oh yeah, everybody in this particular town knows about this one house that
Yeah.
weird things go on, or there's this area in the woods where some sort of creature is seen from time to time, like that seems to be that seems to be something that Americans especially, we seem to love. We seem to love the idea of there's some sort of liminal thing out there, but it's in your town and you can experience it if you're brave enough to go out there. I mean, Blair Witch is this, right?
Oh yeah,
it's the literal witch. The witch is out there.
the Bell Witch. Yes.
Yeah, let's go find the witch. Let's go see if we can interact with this so-called witch. So there seems to be that urban legend element that's much more popular in that particular subgenre in my view.
That's crazy because to compare that to giallos, because a lot of giallos that you watch, like the one the Barrow Ground I mentioned, the Sisters of Ursula, the Evil Nun, like you could tell, like I mean, me being Italian myself, you could tell like there's something there in the Italian psyche that's like erotic and taboo and mysterious, and there's an element of Catholic guilt. And
right.
like there's, but in the American experience, like you were saying, because a lot of folkloric legend was, it's funny because Mytho American, right?
Yeah.
Zante was one of the first guests that came on Content Minded 3 years ago. And he talked about this in his article. I believe it was called American Gnosticism. And I mean, a lot of his stuff, like a lot of, American Protestant listeners would be terribly offended by what he was saying. But there is something to the American backstory that is related to the frontier thesis of confronting the wilderness. There are all these indigenous elements as well. And the American folklore, whether it be in the South, in the Appalachians, or in the North, in the backwoods, there is like something very ancient there, right? Like even in the beginning of the American colonies with, what was it called? The one that disappeared? Roanoke or...
the Roanoke.
Roanoke, yeah. Like they're... Apparently, like, it wasn't actually that mysterious. They just, like... They went over to the indigenous village. So, but, like, it becomes this very popular... there was a great film, actually, about it. With, I believe John Leguizamo was in it. Where it was, like, the darkness would entrap people. And they would see Roanoke on, like, the town bridge. And that was actually a great film. But yeah, like you were saying, there is... I never thought of it that way. It seems that found footage is the only way you can express folklore in a modern context. Where... And it's always, like, the traditional buildup of they're reporters, or they're students doing a research paper, or there's some kind of documentarian, and there's
or nowadays it's the influencer. Like I've seen several. They're not very good. But
Missing Couple. That film. Yeah, right. I mean that was a terrible film, but it's like they got the Instagram filters, and there's like some. It was, like I mean, there needs to be more films where like influencers bite the dust, but now you're saying the influencer now, not just the documentarian, the researcher, but the influencer, that they encounter something very ancient. The one I saw on Tubi, which was very ambitious and very well done, that actually did have a budget, was called The Last Call. Did you see that one?
Man, I think you actually named one that I haven't seen. Write that down. That one doesn't sound familiar.
The Last Call incorporates a lot of...
It doesn't take place in Manchester, the UK, does it?
No.
Okay, I'm thinking of something else. Never mind.
That was another one, yeah. No, The Last Call takes place... It uses cop body cam footage.
Okay.
And this woman's husband disappears in this abandoned school. And it's then revealed that a very ancient indigenous spirit called the Red Witch is coming back to life and took her husband. And it's a very great film. And it has like a lot of, I mean, some people could potentially accuse it of like, I got to say it, but like, cultural appropriation. But I shouldn't say that. It actually does have some indigenous actors in it as well. But there's this Red Witch, and it uses body cam footage, and there's a ceremony performed by the shaman's brother. that's another, a cop gives her this found footage via the body cam footage. And it's a very great film. I liked it. Like, that was one of the more quality found footage films that I found. Another thing I think we're not mentioning also before we get to Savage Land, the cult element as well. That's a very popular one as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's Apocalypse Cult. What's the one by Eli Roth? It was about Jonestown. The Sacrament.
Oh yeah, I never saw that, but yeah, I remember seeing
it. Was all right. Like, I'm not a big, like, I mean, I should be, because again, like, I grew up in that generation of, like, new metal and stuff like that. Right. But Rob Zombie. But Eli Roth, I'm not a big fan of his. Like, some of the films are quite good, but The Sacrament, it was a blow by blow of the day of when it happened in Jonestown. But imagine if, like, a film crew actually witnessed what happened in Jonestown. That's the whole premise of the film, The Sacrament. Okay. It's good, actually. It's quite good. I don't know when it was filmed in terms of, like, the in-story lore, because it could be from the 70s when Jonestown happened, but then there's also, like, I don't recall seeing a cell phone anywhere. So it basically is just like Eli Roth doing Jonestown, more or less. Gotcha. But yeah, the last call was very good. But could you speak more to that? It seems that for a long time, metaphysical storytelling in North America, I mean, and in Europe, went away. But as a pulp writer, do you think that it seems that the horror genre has, like, reinvigorated a lot of local folklore and a lot of interest. Even if it is just independent filmmakers, a lot of them coming from the regions that they're exploring in film. But do you notice, like, is it coming back? Like, I know, like, the term that gets thrown around in our spaces is, like, re-enchantment. But yeah, go ahead, Bart.
I think there is something that part of it, I think, is our society is because of technology is becoming more global, right? You're seeing, like, regional accents disappearing, and I think that makes a lot of people just anxious at an existential level. Like, I'm no longer part of a community. I'm disconnected. All sorts of philosophers and writers have written about that. So, being able to connect to your community or maybe your roots in a small way, I think is important to people. And yeah, every place you live, again, has some sort of strangeness. I'm, like I was telling you before, I'm renting an Airbnb in rural Vermont, visiting family, and not too far from where I'm staying right now is the Bennington Triangle. And it's this area that a lot of people outside of Vermont, definitely not outside of New England, know much about. But it's this area in Vermont where just a lot of weird stuff has happened over years and years. And there's all sorts of, everybody in Vermont has some sort of theory or speculation of what's going on down there, and what's happening. And it's a way, again, for people to kind of to bond together. Like, oh, hey, did you hear about this latest theory about the Bennington Triangle? No, I think it's this. And it gives things to talk about. Just like maybe in your neighborhood there's like a supposedly haunted house that people will talk about.
Oh yes, in fact, there's a particular mansion. There's actually a few of them. I live in the Niagara region, and one of the big ones is called the Blue Ghost Tunnel, which unfortunately they cordoned off. But that was always rumored to be haunted, even though I think there's a naturalistic explanation for this blue mist that used to come up from the water, the still water that would run through it. But it was always like, there was a show called Creepy Canada back in the day that cataloged a lot of local lore in various parts of Canada, but they would focus here in Niagara because one part of Niagara, it's called Niagara in the Lake, It's where all of the War of 1812 barracks and memorabilia and things like the local lore is there. And so there's always rumors that the famous hotel that was there was haunted by the spirit of Sir Isaac Brock or whoever. So, but yeah, go ahead, Parker. I'm trying to.
Was that
Yeah,
a CBC based produced show?
I think it may have been a CBC produced show.
I
Yeah.
wonder if you could still find that.
I tried look I could look for it again. I think some episodes have survived on YouTube. There's one in particular that's from the town I live in. But I'm highly skeptical of this haunted mansion thing because my old man told me that it's basically something a bunch of his friends came up with as kids. Like it was a haunt. But you never know because the place used to be a nursing home way back in the day, way back in the 1800s.
Oh,
So, I mean, maybe there's validity to it. So, but the Bennington Triangle is a 100 square mile area in southwestern Vermont, surrounded Glastonbury Mountain, where several people disappeared between 1945 and 1950, most notably Paula Jean Weldon. Oh, I've heard of Paula Jean Weldon. I've heard of this case, and some people say it may have been some type of missing 411 activity or something of that nature.
Yeah, that's one theory.
Another theory was that it attracts UFOs, similar to the Bermuda Triangle. People have tried to like debunk the Bermuda Triangle, but whatever. What do you think about it? Like, what's your theory?
I really don't know. My favorite theory though is that it's a thinny. I don't know if you're familiar with that term at all. Basically, an old Irish term that meant, it's a space, it's an interdimensional space that's very thin. So it's, for the Irish, it was between like our world and the fairy world, but it can be, it can be any kind of like interdimensional space that people can fall into and just never be seen again.
Yeah, no, I know the term. My girlfriend is Irish, and she follows this Irish folklorist called Moynihan. And he has this documentary, I believe, that was produced by Irish TV about various wells and waterways in Ireland that are alleged to be finnies, where like you can cross over into the other side at certain times of the year, and it's very popular in Irish folklore. I believe there's also some found footage films that take place in Ireland as well. That could be the missing 411 thing. I know my friend Owen Cyclops, he had this very popular thread in the missing 411 thing.
That could take us right into Horror in the High Desert.
Yes, yeah, Horror in the High Desert. Let's go. I didn't watch the third one. I have to find a way to watch the third one. But it's been a while since I watched them. But so take it away. Like, what's the basic synopsis? Yeah.
So you have I guess he's a YouTuber, but he's like a YouTuber with like a very low follower count.
Yeah, he's a low.
Yeah, and he's, I don't know what you would describe, like a survivalist expert, or at least he wants to be known as kind of a survivalist expert. And so he does these videos on just how to survive in the high desert of Nevada.
Like a bushcrafter.
Yeah, bushcraft. Yeah. That's a better term. Thanks. Yeah. So he's a bushcraft expert, goes out into various places within the high desert of Nevada, showing you like, this is how you survive if you're stuck out here, overnight. And doesn't have like a whole lot of interaction with the outside world. Well, the town he lives in is like a very small town, lives with a roommate, and it just, the town that he lives in that movie, it struck me as like one of these places where people move to in order to be forgotten. Like they want nothing to do with like the outside world, and they just want to be forgotten. It's just it's a very depressed town. When they show like shots of the actual town, it's like, oh man, like why
it's like Rust Belt core.
Yeah, exactly. And so one day while he's doing a video, he comes across what he initially thinks is an abandoned house. And you have like these trailers, houses out in the middle of nowhere. A lot of drug manufacturers will use them to manufacture drugs. And so initially he thinks, oh, this is probably what this is. I need to be careful. But then he starts hearing like weird music coming from it, and just has a very weird interaction with.
It was like Jungle
this
House. It was like experimental Jungle House music. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he takes off, but he uploads this to his YouTube channel, of course, and suddenly like it becomes popular. People are like, "What is that? Like, what's going on down there?"
There's a bunch of YouTubers that actually they catalog a lot of very weird events that happens with like disappeared YouTubers that are like low beat channels, but then their video gets very popular on like subreddits. And I think his mother in the film kept referring it to as a blog, but it's basically just a YouTube channel. Like it's
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think it is more of a blog, but he's able to upload like pictures, right,
And video.
and video, and so it gets popular. And so what ends up happening is, and I like how the director, the writer did this, is that this guy who was basically invisible to the world now has some popularity. He has some cachet in this very small, basically what you would call like a niche community, right?
Yeah.
And so they push him to go back out there. Like, you need to go back. You need to find that location. That's the other thing, is that he had a hard time. He wasn't really sure where it was at, but they kept on pushing him and saying, no, you have to film more. You have to figure out what's going on. And so he gives into the peer pressure. And I can't remember, maybe you remember, does he go back like he go back like a couple of times before he disappears? It's not just like one other time.
He goes back a couple of times to take footage, and at nighttime he disappears. He takes his Glock with him,
Right.
and he starts shooting at the thing, and it doesn't do anything. And I think at the his mother said when she had access to the blog, there were comments that said, "I wonder if he found it when he went missing." He didn't upload for a number of days, but then he went missing, and so yeah.
Yeah, and so from there it's the whole thing is a documentary. And I really like the actress that they hired to play the reporter, the journalist. Like, she has like, she sounds exactly what you would expect some sort of investigative journalist to sound like. I thought the director did an excellent job of hiring her. It's like, oh yeah, it's like I totally believe that this is a Nevada investigative reporter who's just sniffing around trying to find a scoop.
Yeah.
And so, she talks about his disappearance and all the people that she interviewed. Of course, they interviewed the roommate, like you said, they interviewed the mother, and all of these things come to light slowly. The director kind of slowly feeds you like these different things, these odd things, either about the missing influencer or like the environment. He does a really excellent job. He just keep feeding you like these little tidbits every once in a while. And I thought that was really fantastic. And the theme of the movie really is about clinical depression and loneliness, because it's clear by the end that this guy suffered from clinical depression and was obviously like a very lonely young man.
I had the impression that he had some sort of high functioning autism as well. Like, he was they interviewed his roommate, and they said that him and his friends, when they went out with him, it was very grueling because he was, of course, like a bushcrafter survivalist, and they were just like pretending like, they wanted like a fun camping experience. But he's like, no, don't bring any food. We're just gonna forage and we're gonna make a camp. And he's like, oh, I hated it. I hated going out with him. But he was like very dedicated to it, the way that a lot of these bushcraft YouTubers are allegedly. I say allegedly because some of them, it's like anything on YouTube, a lot of it's fakery. But yeah, I mean, there's some who are really dedicated to teaching people skills. And so he wanted to do that. Like, but then he disappears, and then the footage comes out, because again, a lot of these found footage films, there's very clever ways of integrating different source material, be it pictures like with Savage Land, or be it with like body cam footage, which then comes up in the second film of Horror in the High Desert. And what was it? I thought it was going to be like another serial killer type of film, but but from your interpretation, like, was it like some kind of creature or man, or
I I got the. Do you ever see the movie The Hills Have Eyes?
Yes, 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 yeah,
I
yeah,
got that vibe from it. That they're like these these mutated human beings, mutated from God only knows what.
yeah, yeah,
Like living out there, just kind of almost nomadic, just kind of moving from like um, these deserted homes and RVs and other places,
yeah.
just kind of scavenging whatever they can get their hands on. Um, but there could be a supernatural. I mean, that's kind of one of the nice things about at least this first movie is the director doesn't give you a lot of explanation. It's just like, you know, this is what he saw with his camera, and
Yeah,
that's it. Like
yeah,
there's
yeah.
no exposition in terms of like, well, what are they? What are they doing out there?
I
Yeah,
believe, yeah, I believe The Hills Have Eyes was about well, of course there was like inbreeding, but also they're like living on a former nuclear test site.
yeah. There's like
Yeah,
radiation, thrown in there, and
yeah,
cannibalism and all that
yeah,
good stuff.
yeah. And then the second one, I remember they like use the woman as bait because they have to like shore up their numbers through things I can't mention on YouTube.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, yeah.
It's a lonely existence out there.
Exactly. Yeah. So that yeah that's a good explanation. Then the second one is about a woman who wants to become a geologist, and she lives in one of these trailers,
Right.
and they find they find this footage, this videotape that was in the walls of this trailer that I guess was implying these like Hills Have Eyes figures. So yeah, take it away.
That one I only saw once, and I don't remember that one as much. The first one I saw twice, and the third one I saw twice, so
Hmm.
I'm a little bit more familiar with that, with those two movies. Whereas the second one, yeah, I just remember, yeah, it's a woman. She's out there in that trailer doing research, um, and she disappears as well. Um, and yeah, you get a little bit of I I got the feeling like the director's trying to like pad out the mythology a little bit more with the second
Yeah.
one, which I don't I understand like people who like the first movie were probably demanding saying, "Hey man, we need to know more about, the those guys out there walking around. Like who are they? Like what are they doing?"
Hmm.
So I have a feeling that he probably had to cave into that pressure, but
Yeah.
I don't want that. I want there to be some more mystery. You don't have to show me the entire monster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The second one had it had almost like a vibe similar to Sinister. If you ever watched the Sinister films,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
that's a good comparison. Yeah,
yeah. When I was younger, I watched the first Sinister, and I was terrified. It was actually quite a good film in terms of a horror film
yeah,
that
yeah.
incorporated found footage elements.
Right,
Yeah. I mean, then like later on, it gets like you were saying, like the like it's sort of like fiction, like it's like fantasy writers, like they just focus on like lore building.
right,
It becomes that, but then like the first two Sinisters were incredible. The Swedish, when they played the tape of the Swedish family in the '70s that gets butchered, like oh my god, that was hair raising.
right.
Um, but what was the third one? What happened in the third one? I have to watch it.
The third one, they go in a much more supernatural direction.
Mhm.
You'll have to watch it and let me know what you think of it. Um, I liked it more than the second one, but it's still not as good as the first movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And what you're doing is you have this young man from Mexico who's obsessed with what happened to the bushcraft expert in
Mm.
the first movie, and also knows about what happened with the woman in the RV in the second movie, and so he's come up with this unified theory.
Thank you for listening to the Content Minded podcast. If you wish to support me and listen to every episode in full, then please go to patreon.com/giantart and substack.com/Geo's Content Corner. There you will find the full archive of every content minded episode, as well as every Giant Art Review episode, and exclusive to all patrons, the weekly Cole Report, where I break down interesting stories and discourse from throughout the week. Subscribe today to keep the content renaissance alive.